That's it. And then why don't you go?
Thank you. So this was after the U.S. dropped bombs in central Mosul and destroyed a building full of ISIL's cash. CNN reported that U.S. commanders had been willing to consider up to 50 civilian casualties from the airstrike due to the importance of the target. Do you agree with the Pentagon when they say 50 civilian casualties could be tolerated for this kind of a target?
I've not seen any statements, so I have no idea what you're referring to. Look, we always say that, and we both say it and through our actions, I think, live up to it, is the fact that we seek to minimize civilian casualties in any kind of military action or airstrike that we undertake.
Previously, you called reports about civilian casualties in Russian strikes disturbing. What does the number of civilian deaths have to be for you to call it disturbing?
Well, again, I don't think, so when we're talking about civilian casualties, what we always say, and I think live up to, is the fact that we always seek to minimize civilian casualties in any kind of operation, military operation, airstrike that we carry out. What we have also said about what we've seen as a result of Russian airstrikes that have been carried out in Syria thus far are what appear to be excessive civilian casualties in some of these airstrikes. We based that on, as you know, a number of NGO reports, as well as information that we're able to gather from our own sources, that we've seen excessive numbers. I'm not going to give you a number certain that over 5 civilians, really any civilian death, is a matter of concern, and we've been very candid about that. But we also recognize, and I think what's important here is when we do cause civilian casualties, we recognize that. And in the case of Afghanistan, certainly we conducted a thorough investigation into that incident in Kunduz, where a Médecins Sans Frontières hospital was struck by ordnance from the U.S. military. So I think a couple of points here. One, there's accountability when and if civilian casualties are caused by U.S. forces. And then secondly, always an effort at the root of all of our military operations to minimize civilian casualties, if not avoid them altogether.
Just to clarify,
Sure.
What is the standard by which you judge when deciding to criticize civilian casualties? Is it a number, or is it?
No, I wouldn't say it's a number, but it's. I would say that it's again, and I would preface my remarks by you should really speak to the Pentagon, who are much better at assessing these types of incidents. But I think clearly we want to see any use of force seek to minimize civilian casualties. If we see a pattern of excessive civilian casualties, or if we see airstrikes that seem to be carried out.
Casualties? Do you have a numbers for such an assessment?
I just said I don't have a specific number, but I think if we see a pattern emerge where it appears that civilian casualties are the result of continued airstrikes, and again, that's not just what's happening in Syria, it's elsewhere in the world as well, then we express concern about that.
Do you
Please.
think?
Yeah, sure.
Isn't one civilian casualty really too many?
I said that. I said we seek to minimize and obviously avoid civilian casualties altogether.
If your overriding concern was to minimize the number, you'd never drop a single bomb. So the value of the target is a relevant calculation.
Yes, but I would also say, again, and I'm speaking as someone who's a non-military, but from our vantage point and what I think we've said publicly about this is that we always consider in the calculus the possible effects on the civilian populations of any military operation we carry out.
But there is a calculus, so a particularly important target, you'd be prepared to tolerate a greater number of civilian casualties.
Again, I'm not going to give you a formula for that. I think,
No, but
I mean, obviously.
He's used the word
but I
calculus.
think,
I'm just trying to.
No, I understand it.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be facetious at all. I'm just trying to say that these are very difficult processes and very difficult decisions to make. And obviously, we're dealing with high-value targets. But I just would say that that's always part of our calculus when we're looking at this.
But isn't that? Do you find it disturbing that the U.S. was willing to accept 50 civilian?
Again, your initial comment was that was somehow accepted as a part of it. I don't know that that's the case. Please say.
Go to the Palestinian-Israeli issue.
Sure.
And talk about the excessive use of force there. I asked John last Friday, but since then, more than 15 Palestinians have been killed since last Friday, and hundreds have been wounded. At what point would you consider Israel's response to be the excessive use of force?
Sure.